Hello and welcome. Our journey has now brought us all the way to the second wave of Detroit Techno that came in the 90s, led by artists such as Jeff Mills and Richie Hawtin. But how did it all start? That we will deep dive into, and we will also recreate these famous sounds using the Korg Volcas. Let's go! So, before we recreate these sounds using the Korg Volcas, we will deep dive a bit into the origins of the second wave of Detroit Techno. First of all, why is it called the second wave? Well, basically because there was a first wave. During the years 88 to 89, artists such as the Belleville 3, Eddie Flashing Volcas and Blake Baxter created music that was called the first wave of Detroit Techno. And this first wave we covered in an earlier episode, and as you might remember, the first wave of Detroit Techno together with Chicago House then basically led all the way to Acid House in UK in the late 80s and early 90s. Which later then mutated into Eurodance. But however, in the US, house and techno did not reach yet the same commercial success as it did overseas in Europe. So here house and techno remained quite underground. Instead, new artists emerged in the second wave, like for example Carl Craig, Mad Mike Banks and of course the wizard Jeff Mills. Whilst in the first wave, the difference between Chicago House, Detroit Techno and Acid House was quite small. However, during the second wave, then the Detroit Techno started to transform into the shape of techno that we know of today. It became faster, much more dystopic, heavier and more underground than before. But who shaped this sound? Mainly, I would say this was centered around one individual, and that was Jeff Mills. Jeff Mills started DJing quite early. Already in the 80s, he had actually a radio show on WJLB Detroit, where he played music during the years 86 to 89. Then after that, in 1990, together with Mike Banks and Robert Hood, they formed the DJ collective UR, short for Underground Resistance, that played this heavier and less mainstream dance music in nightclubs. In an interview, Jeff Mills has also claimed that he was very inspired by sci-fi and he wanted to make his techno to describe some kind of dystopic future or where he saw things were going in the future. So he wanted basically to make very futuristic techno music. But this heavier techno music would probably not have left the underground scene if it wasn't for this guy. This is Dmitri Hagemann, the founder of the nightclub Tresor in Berlin. And in 1991, Dmitri heard of Jeff Mills and invited him over to Tresor to play some music there in the nightclub. And this new nightclub Tresor focused on the new, heavier techno sound that they wanted to feature, so the sound of Jeff Mills was perfect. And this cooperation also led to the release of the album X101, which was released by Underground Resistance but also by the label Tresor in Germany and in Europe. And it became very popular, especially in Germany and Europe. In this album, I especially think the track The Final Hour is very interesting. In this track you can definitely hear a lot of the future techno and minimal music that would come later. And also when you reflect over, it's actually not so strange that we had this Detroit, Germany connection, since many of the early Detroit techno musicians has clearly stated they were inspired by the German band Kraftwerk. So it's only natural that there was a connection here. And then since the cooperation was successful and Detroit DJs actually got more recognition in Germany than they did in their hometown, the releases on Tresor label continued over the coming years, featuring also, for example, Eddie Flashing Volcas and Joan Atkins. And after X101 came X102 And after that came Jeff Mills' first solo project, which was called Waveform Transmission Volume 1, which is a highly rated album when it comes to influential records within techno. And the sound on this record became more or less the future blueprint for techno music. And the next one to take on the spotlight within Detroit Techno was gonna be Richie Hawtin, that already since 1990 released Techno and Minimal on his own label +8 Records. However, it would take some time before he got the recognition he deserved. But since like 1995, especially his releases under the alias Plastic Man and Fuse became getting almost a legendary status amongst techno DJs. Okay, but it feels like we have forgotten someone, haven't we? Is there someone we have still not mentioned? Who did this track already in 1988? That sounds quite a lot actually like second wave Detroit Techno. Blake Baxter, who was also invited by Dimitri to DJ at the Tresor at the same time as Jeff Mills.
Mike Banks wasn't a DJ, he was more a musician, and we were invited to come back to play in a club. And the only other DJ that had a lot of experience was that we were in contact with was Blake Baxter. So Blake and I came for the first time back to Berlin as DJs to play at the Tresor for the first time.
Blake Baxter, and who released this track already in 1991 under the alias The Prince of Techno. Blake Baxter, and who was the second one to make a release on the Tresor label right after X101. Blake Baxter! So once again Blake Baxter was there, and he played almost the equally important role actually as Jeff Mills in the creation of the second wave Detroit Techno. But now it's finally time to recreate some second wave Detroit Techno on our Korg Volcas. And we will start with the drums. So, for my techno track I am going to use the Korg Volca sample for drums. Simply because I really want to use the sounds of the Roland TR-909 in this track. It was pretty clear that Jeff Mills used the TR-909 in his tracks. He was featured with that drum machine a lot. It was almost like that was an extra family member of his. Sorry about that, Volca kick, Volca drum and Volca beats. I promise you will be featured in another episode. So now I have loaded my Volca sample with a lot of TR-909 samples. And we will start to program the kick drum. And the core of techno was actually a FX processed drum loop. So what you did was you add a lot of FX units to your signal chain to get the drums to sound differently. So techno music was all about using technology. So while other musicians wanted the drum machines to sound as much as possible like real drums, techno artists rather wanted them to sound as far away from real drums as possible. It should be definitely a technological sound that was like from space. And I've been experimenting a bit here like a mad scientist, and I think I've found now the right signal chain. So what I'm going to add to the kick drum is first a reverb from the Volca samples, built-in reverb. Then I will run it through this Fender compressor. And then I will add this Mooer Black Secret distortion. And then I think we'll get the right techno drum sound. And I think this is basically what they did in the early 90s to get the right Detroit techno sound. So starting with the clean kick drum, and then I will add the FX. So then adding reverb. And then I'll add a compressor. And then I will also add a distortion. And there we have the techno kick drum. Then I will just add some more drums. And without the FX, it sounds like this. And then I add the FX. And then I get the proper underground Detroit techno sound. So with the drums we're almost there, we already have the techno sound, but we should add some more synthetic sounds as well. So I will start to add a bass line from the Volca bass, and I've just programmed like kind of low tone bass line. Sounds like this. And here I will use a trick that I used a lot in back in the days. So since I have an analog mixer here, what I can do then is I pull down the fader a bit, and then I max out the gain, both the gain on the Volca bass as well as the gain on the mixer. And then I will basically overdrive the circuits, and I will create an overdrive distortion using basically a overdrive of the mixer. And then it sounds like this. And then I will add a bit of reverb on that as well. Yes, that sounds really cool. Finally, for the Volca FM, I found a cool sound. So I'm starting with this preset that is called, I think, warm bass. But then I found a glitch that if I turn down the octave way too much, somehow the FM circuits get a bit crazy and you get some weird electronic noise, which is pretty perfect for techno. Check this out. So I will add some weird effects like that to my techno track as well. Cool, then we have everything we need. It is time to jam. Let's go. Thanks a lot for watching. Please click like if you like, and also feel free to leave a comment. It is always nice. Also, you must absolutely not forget to click that subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't done it already. Thanks. That's awesome. And next episode, I haven't fully decided yet. I think it's time I either do French house or I do UK garage. Or is it something completely else you think I should deep dive into next? Please leave a comment what you think. And with that said, it's only one thing left to say. Until next time. Ta-da!